Hello, good morning. A pause for a selfie. So the art of expansion, right? Um, well, expand internationally, it is indeed an art, right? And as any good art, it should be felt, not really explained. It can be inspiring, but not really copied, right? I have here with me Rafaela and Cristóbal, both artists on the art of expansion. And first, welcome. And I want to hear from you, with the experience you have so far. What are like some lessons learned from expanding internationally that you can share, as well as insights?
Well, hello everyone. Happy to be here talking about expansion. Definitely one of the most interesting things startups go through when going global. So talking about lessons, I would say expansion has to do with executing and with thinking and planning. But at the same time, you have to really know where you want to get. If you don't know where you want to get, it's going to be difficult to plan and to go ahead. So what do you talk about? Maybe start with namings or so?
Yes. So sometimes when you decide to expand internationally, the decision goes more with many other strategies, but sometimes we underestimate the naming aspect, right? What have you learned? You have both gone through this phase. What have you learned about naming a startup? When I first found it, it was Jinjin. In Brazil, we know what Jinjin means, and maybe in Latin America, people would know like Jinjin, small name for dinheiro. So if I were to go to Latam, I would be fine, but not really in US or any part of the world. So what have you learned about that?
Okay, perfect. So it's going to be fun because I'm going to give the entrepreneur perspective, and we have here the VC or venture capital perspective. So it's going to be the two-sided of the answers. So I would say naming is a thing, definitely. I mean, when you're starting your business, in sort of a way, you need to try to visualize where you want to go, okay? So if you can achieve to put a name that's going to fit the name in the future, you're going to be doing magic. But in sort of a way, when startups really start their business, it's difficult to know where you're going to end in 1 year and 2 years, which countries are you going to end up, if your business model is going to change, it's not going to change. So of course, if you can nail the name at the beginning, success, and that's perfect. So at the beginning, always try to put a name that you're going to keep in moment in time. But at the end, if you need to change, you will have to adapt. If your name is not suitable for your new business model, your new channels or whatever, you will need to adapt. The only advice I would give there is to really think, if you change a name, it's the cost associated with it. There's time associated with it, so try to nail on the second name, but again, that's an output more than an input.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And I think from an investor point of view, it's not a determinant of success or failure. And for sure, it's a very complex decision that in day zero, you really don't know or don't have the full visibility of how you're going to end up in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So the only thing to have in mind is really, in case you realize that in order to expand, the original name doesn't really fit or is not something that would sound right or is not something that would fit with the culture of another market, and you need to either change your name or have 2 different names for different markets, that's totally fine as long as you have a well-thought plan and you're able to execute having had all of these concepts behind in mind when you're preparing for it.
And maybe to add there on a personal story, we're here having a conversation, so actually, Betterfly started with another name. We will call it at the beginning Burn to Give. You can Google that for you guys. I'm not going to give you a pitch about what Burn to Give was, but Burn to Give really suited us for the beginning of our business model. But when we started growing up, starting getting our market fit, Betterfly was a much more better fit for our name, and we did the change at some point in our history.
Sometimes you even change the name, not really for the international expansion, but for the product expansion itself. We have seen that. But one aspect that it's actually more relevant sometimes than the name is the timing, right? When to expand. Like I used to call it when you're playing war, the game, sometimes you're like conquering Americas and then you go Europe, but like you have to conquer some space first. But when is the perfect timing? Is there such a thing as perfect timing to expand internationally? founder vision and VC, please.
I can start. Maybe from the VC vision, what we really look for when a founder is pitching and already planning to go international, or if we're already an investor and in a board discussion, there is a plan to go international, what we would really look for is the signs of traction and go-to-market strategy that shows you are ready to give this next step. The only thing we will avoid and have a very clear mind when advising founders is to make sure you don't add complexity when that's not needed, and make sure that your product is functioning well on your home market and you know how to take it to your consumers before you go to another market and you need to learn about the local consumers and add complexity levels and probably some sort of distraction there that could jeopardize the whole execution. So it's all about your go-to-market playbook and making sure you know what to do because you have already done that and it has functioned in your original market before.
So yeah, I agree with that. Expanding for the sake of expanding makes no sense, basically. Okay, so I would say it's always good to have plans. It's always good to have, a certain time frame where you want to expand, where you want to go. It's like your roadmap in sort of a way. But actually timing, it's going to be flexible. You have to be open to know when the right timing is there, when the opportunity is right, when the right market you need to go. So I would say timing is much more of having your eyes open for opportunities more than just putting it in a deck board or whatever. Yeah, eventually you can think the best timing to go out is in 6 months, but you will have to see if in 6 months, the product is going right, the markets are going well, economy, geopolitical risks, whatever. So I would say that always have a time frame in line, the goal and the objective, forward to you, but timing, again, it's going to be an output, not an input in sort of way. But of course, I mean, it has to do with everything you're doing. So you have to have it there, but I wouldn't say it's the main decision. It's like, we're going to open this country on this month. There are a lot of more important things in this way before you say, okay, now it's the right time to go there.
And it's interesting, one thing, like we have a Latin American founder, but not Brazilian, which makes a lot of difference because we're a continental country. So many, and you've probably seen that as a VC, there's a difference between startups that are founded in Brazil and we are so big, and conquering Brazil, it's very much difficult and more difficult than conquering, let's say, Argentina and Colombia and Chile, which like small countries. Like, so if we put like Israeli startups, when a startup is born in Israel, you have to be born global thinking, right? Have you seen this difference when you analyze pitches? When you see like Latin American, not Brazil, founded startups, do they have in the pitch, the fundraising pitch, since day one that they will expand, and in Brazil not really? How do you see that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We see that a lot, especially when looking into ecosystems like Chile, Argentina, Uruguay. Mexico, not so much, because Mexico in itself is already a very, very relevant market where you would have at least 4 or 5 years to grow to a decent size before you think about another country. But on the smaller locations in LATAM, it is a matter of survival that you start from day one already thinking about how you can cross borders in an efficient way and having already in mind what types of product adaptation or communication adaptations you will have in order to reach the consumers in these other markets, neighboring markets. But Brazil and Mexico are probably outlier cases given the dimension and the dynamics of the local countries as well.
So it's okay if you see a pitch from a Brazilian founder that don't mention international footprint since day one?
Absolutely. It would be actually a red flag if they are launching in Sao Paulo and then maybe in year 2 on the projection I see, I don't know, Mexico.
Okay.
Then that would trigger a question of why.
Why?
I mean, I completely agree with that. The investor perspective towards compared to the entrepreneur perspective, it's almost the same. Like, for instance, when we started in Chile, right? Now we have operations in 8 countries. Brazil was the first one. It's not the typical thing for Chilean startups to come to Brazil first, but we wanted challenges, so we did that. But eventually, when we started in Chile, even though we're still figuring out how to reach, our market, how to develop our product, and so, since day one, we had the ambitions to go further. I mean, Chile is an awesome country. I love my Chilean country, but it's a 17 million people country. If you wanna go global, you wanna raise capital, you wanna move forward fast. Raising capital, just saying you're gonna target Chile, I mean, it's gonna be a small market in sort of a way. So if you're starting in a small country with a small market, it would be wise for you not to say you're gonna conquer the world immediately, but to say, you know, my next steps are going global, are going to these countries and so forth. You're starting in a country such as Mexico, such as Brazil. I mean, markets are huge. Just by nailing this one country, it represents 10 of the other countries or even more, sort of a way. So, yeah, it really depends. That there's no wrong or right answer towards putting that in the deck or not. I would say, or my advice in that case is, if you put something in your deck, it has to make sense. Like,
Okay.
are you putting it just because it's going to sound fancy, you're going global, or are you putting that in your deck because it makes sense for your whatever, your expansion plans?
But have you been questioned by VCs? And for you to know, she invests in him, like Mondi Ventures invests in Betterfly. But have you been questioned, like, first Chile and then Brazil? But why Brazil first then? Because you take time to conquer Brazil. So why not be like talking to your VC saying, "Oh, we'll be like 6 countries first and then Brazil because we'll be a lot more experienced before coming to Brazil." Have you been questioned? And if yes, what was your answer, your plan?
So it's a trick question because the job of the VC is questioning everything we do in sort of a way. So they're doing the good job questioning that. But yeah, no, of course. But I would say the questions always come from a positive side to really, you know, double click on what you're doing and why you're doing it, you know? Like, the question we always get is like, okay, if you're putting Brazil there, if you're putting 7 countries there, the main thing you have to get right is your focus. I could put 20 countries, 30 countries, but will I have the bandwidth and the focus to really, you know, achieve those countries, to put focus on those countries? So, yeah, of course I've been questioned, but it's always more than a question, it's a conversation. Like, okay, let's figure out, what are your plans? Okay, towards this plan, it makes sense to go to these countries first or that countries first, and then eventually make a roadmap to that things. When we opened Brazil, there was a lot of conversations. I mean, we could have opened many other countries, but again, I'm going back to the first question, why we opened Brazil at the beginning? Because it was a challenge, and at least we like challenges. Brazil is one of the biggest benefit markets in the world, and we're in the benefit space, so it made sense. We had a lot to learn at the beginning. We were starting, so Brazil gave us the opportunity to learn a lot. And of course, there was an opportunity. We closed a partnership with Icatu, the local insurer here. And you know, having the right partner where you open a country, it's super important. It's de-risking the market, it's de-risking the entrance. So imagine just getting here, being a Chilean startup, it's super different from getting here, Chilean startup, having a partnership with a local insurer. So
Perfect.
again, it has to do with timing and your roadmap.
And you forgot to mention that on top of the Icatu partnership, you also acquired a local player in Brazil, which gave you all the people, the personnel, the local knowledge, and made the whole story make sense. So at the end of the day, it's a combination of a strategic player, a strategic local partner, as well as having the right hands, the right people on board to give this next step.
Exactly. So again, we had the questions, we had the conversation, and eventually Brazil made sense because of all of that.
Great. Yeah, and it's a bit related to timing as well. I was talking to them at the backstage, like, is there such a thing as perfect timing? Because sometimes it's too early and sometimes it's too late. So you don't want to miss the range of the perfect spot, right? Like maybe you deciding Brazil and having the VC backing you up is because, like, if you take 2 years, any local startup can get the market in your space, right?
So I always use this phrase, try to get the right approach at the right time. Yeah, I mean, life and entrepreneur is not an outlier here. It's about timing. But again, it's not about putting a time, 9 months, I'm going to get there in 9 months, you know, but it's being in the right place at the right time. It's making the right decisions at the right moment. When is the best moment to open? If you start now a startup, and in 1 month you're going to operate in 8 countries, it really doesn't make sense. It's going to be a mess, you know. Mm-hmm. If in 2-3 months you start operating well, you see you have the capacities, you have a good conversation with the VCs, with the local partners, and so more than timing being the frame for the decisions, I would think that the decision, again, the timing is an output of many other factors in the conversation.
Nice. And one thing that I've seen when I study international expansion, that the first thing you look at is regulation, right? Because many startups operates in regulated markets. So if fintechs, benefits, and you can name it, you always have to look into regulation. So as a founder, probably you look into regulation first, and then you think about how strategy and so on. But building a team, in my opinion, like every person that would ask me something about, oh, how hard or how easy it is to found a startup, and the cliche answer is people. People all the time. And international expansion, at the end of the day, is not about regulation, because it's like a technical aspect of it, but hiring the best team can be a success or failure factor, right?
No, for sure. But then the topic around how much of a local team versus a home market team you can have, I think it depends on two main factors. One is, how does your sales strategy work? How much of a product-led sales versus a traditional sales-led approach you have? That will determine if you can probably leverage more of a centralized team that can cover multiple regions, because it's purely product-led, versus having to talk to people, having to go through a long and lengthy sales process where a touch, an eye-to-eye contact, or a local nuance and cultural aspect would make a difference, and that requires local people. And then on the product side, you also need to take into account if your product is already ready to be plug and played into different geographies, or if you need to do a lot of adaptations, either from a regulatory aspect or from a customer behavior aspect, that will require probably some local product teams collecting this feedback from customers and recycling the loop from the sales effort to make sure that the product is ready for that local market. So there is no right or wrong answer. It really depends on what type of company you are and what type of product you have.
But it's interesting that your answer includes like distribution models, right? Which is something new, maybe as well. How did it work for you? Did you move to the other country? Your co-founders did? How did it work?
So Rafaela's answer is like the perfect answer, so I have nothing to add on that. But I'm going to talk maybe on the cultural side, and it has to do with what you're asking me. So having local people is always important in sort of a way. You know, the countries have idiosyncrasies. They have special ways of doing things, of moving, of negotiating, and so on. And having local people is always important. It's really going to depend on if you have a product-led sales, a product growth team, or whatever. But having local people is important. But at the same time, and what works super well for us was exporting talent at the same time. We had our headquarters in Chile. We had a big operation there. And eventually we found out that sending people from the operations team to work with the operations teams locally, the synergies was just simply amazing. So something we did a lot in the company was move people from one country to the other, sometimes for just a small period of time, sometimes permanently. We're still doing that. In the case of Brazil, where we opened Brazil, I came to live to Brazil for 8 months to open the operations here, and it was super successful. Eventually, at one point, the team was moving forward alone. I went back. Now the team is much more local than global in sort of a way. So again, it's going to the title of this. It's an art. In the culture aspect, it's an art. You have to be super aware, looking at different signals, what is best. Maybe it's best just to have small countries, and this is going to evolve in the future. Like as your product evolves, as the company evolves, it's not going to be the same as the beginning, and you have to make those decisions. And after 2 years, the product is much more automatic. The operations are centralized in one country. Let's have smaller teams. Maybe other countries are going to start being the headquarters of the company. So it's a live model, and again, that's why there's no right or wrong answer. It's more of a live model, and you have to be watching it all the time.
And it's interesting you mentioning coming here to or elsewhere, or even moving people, is that you start exporting the culture, right? And making sure, and then we've been through the pandemic, the hybrid, we all the time talk about how culture is affected. So this is a way as well of mixing local culture and language. We were talking like...
Absolutely. I mean, if you want to be a global company, that's at least our case, we have to mix our cultures. Eventually, every country is going to have a paint or a bit of their culture, and that's fine and that's perfect, but the company as a whole has had a culture. So sharing experiences, moving people from one country to the other, how they do things. Maybe operation teams work in one way in Brazil, another way in Chile. There's no right or wrong way. It's like, how do we do it the Betterfly way in sort of a way? So yeah, culturally speaking, I think, moving people from one country to the other, it's only good things for the company.
Great. But Cristóbal, you in the third question, you were like, the right decision, the right moment, the right, like, nothing goes really right? So what have gone wrong? We usually talk about successes. We are all here, the whole Web Summit stages, and people talking about what has gone good and right, but not really about failures and gone wrong. Things are spoken. Like, I want to hear from your both experiences, what has gone wrong?
So just to make a brief summary, in 2022, Betterfly was just operating in Chile, and in 6 months, we opened 8 countries. There was a lot of conversations with VCs and a lot of the things, questions asked, and so a lot of things went well and went wrong. But I would say, in order to summarize them in one word or in one concept or one advice, it would be not to underestimate things. Like putting a country on your pitch deck, it's easy, Thinking about potential problems and potential solutions is still easy. That managing those problems is actually hard, And simple things such as language, you can say, hey, it's easy, we'll figure it out. We have translators, we have AI now. Language is not that easy when you're here in the country, They have small differences and I'm just putting language there because it's the first thing top of mind. Operation, process, cultural, 8 countries at the same time. So I would say, in sort of a way, what we did wrong or what could go wrong is underestimating. And it's because as founders, many times we are ultra positive, Everything's going to be fine. We need to move forward and that's like maybe a common problem in founders, or a happy problem in founders. And from the positive side, it comes the underestimating. You say, no, it's going to be fine, it's going to be good. So again, double clicking and maybe not underestimating, or trying not to underestimate or you have to take risks. So the way to take it is calculated risk. Let me put it in that way.
Afa.
From an investor perspective, we have the ability to observe many failures and successes across the portfolio, right? And the beauty of it is to really extract the learnings and make sure we identify the traits of what was determinant for that particular failure or success in order to advise better our founders and work better with them as they continuously grow. And I would say that from all the stories that didn't go so well in our portfolios for the last 8 years since Mundi started, the common trait of the failures was about lack of focus. And the lack of focus is very much related to timing, as we were discussing, but also to underestimating the complexities around the plans you put for yourself. And making sure that as a founder, you are aware of these complexities and you get to think on the first, second, third derivative of a decision you make once you are implementing that decision is probably a determinant of how much more success you can have once you start executing it versus simply wishful thinking and playing along and then being subject to a lot of distractions and a lot of other problems that will potentially put you down.
Yeah, and it's the underestimating side of it, as I see hearing you guys now, is like, it's one thing is have like 3 million customers in Brazil. One thing is have 3 million customers in Brazil, Chile, Mexico, and so on. So managing all the cultures, all the people, and of course, they're like the app and the platform has to speak different languages and have inputs from different wishes as well, right? And prioritize what the platform should be. And once you're hearing different people from different countries, cultures, and everything, so what to do, right? So I get you, the underestimate and the lack of focus. Being a founder myself, and if we have like many founders here, I believe, the focusing is the main challenge of any founder, because as you mentioned, we are ultra positive, as we should be. At the same time, we think we can do everything, but losing focus. We have a Brazilian saying, like, cobre a cabeça e descobre o pé, right? So you're covering, you try not to feel
The
cold.
blanket is short.
Yeah, the blanket short, exactly. So yeah, we've reached the timing. I hope you have enjoyed. And if anything, reach out in LinkedIn or anything. Thank you. Good morning.
Bye.
Thank
Thanks.
you.